Want to close more deals and boost your sales? The psychology of money holds the key to understanding the customer's deepest motivations and anxieties. But here's the catch. Most salespeople are so focused on pushing their product or service that they completely miss the psychological factors that are driving buying decisions. So if you want to unlock the buyer's brain and create win-win solutions, ditch the pushy tactics and let's dive deep into the psychology of money. What I found is really interesting over the years with selling is how much of sales is actually emotional and not logic. Now, are there some people that buy logically? Yes. And most of the time it's an emotional decision. And so I think there's some important things we want to understand about the psychology around money, the psychology of loss, the psychology of scarcity that goes into our sales conversations. And so one, I think it's just understanding first off that people, especially when they're going into a sales conversation, whether you're giving them a quote, whether you're sitting down for a consultation, whether they've asked questions about buying, there almost always is some fear and anxiety that a buyer has. Maybe you've heard this before. You sit down with a client or prospect and they say, hey, just so you know, we're not going to make any decisions today. I've heard that before, and I'm sure you likely have too. I've also had clients say that to me who end up signing it and going forward. They're trying to set a frame that they won't make a decision. And usually there's a fear that, hey, we're going to get twisted and doing something we don't want to do. Or, hey, this might cost too much money for us, right? There's emotional and psychological factors that are leading them to say something like that. And so what I want to do very early on in the conversation is help them feel like they can say no. We want to, in sales inception, we call it the kick, where we kick them, kick them awake to a new reality. One, part of that is helping them feel like they can say no, feel like they can share concerns, and that we're going to invite those. And then two, helping them see and look at things in a completely different way. And we have to recognize that a lot of the people we work with, not everyone, and a lot of society has a scarcity mindset. There's a belief in the back of a lot of people's minds that there's just not enough resources to go around. That may be not enough money, that may be not enough time. And often what we see this mindset causes is a potential loss of money instead of a potential gain of value, right? So they're so worried about losing the few dollars on your product or service that they overlook the value they could be gaining by your product or service. And that psychology behind that is just also part of this idea of loss aversion, that we're more motivated to avoid loss than we are motivated to gain. And look, I think this is a natural thing we're wired for. If you just understand how we've evolved as humans, like our brains are there to keep us alive. Luckily, we live in a day and age where you're not always worried about dying. And it used to be you were always afraid and you were always worried about how you were going to live and how you're going to survive. So loss was a very important thing to try and avoid, And so we have to remember we're hardwired that way as people. And if we go into a sales conversation focused on our product or service and get to the end and we're surprised when we hear, well, I'm not sure if I can afford this or it's not in the budget, then we're doing everything wrong. That is something that's going to come up over and over and over again in sales conversations. And so most financial decisions, they are made not logically. They're made emotionally. I love, this quote is from The Psychology of Money. Few people make financial decisions purely with a spreadsheet. They make them at the dinner table or in a company meeting, places where personal history, your own unique view of the world, ego, pride, marketing, and odd incentives are scrambled together into a narrative that works for you. And later in the book, he says, there's no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. So we have to remember those things. We have to remember that people are afraid to lose money. And there's a lot of emotion tied in with that. And so often when someone says they can't afford something, it may not actually mean they can't afford it. It could mean they don't see the value. So they're afraid, hey, I'm going to lose out on this money and there's not enough value to make up for it. Maybe it's they don't trust you. Maybe they don't believe you're worth the investment, right? So those could all be psychological barriers that we have to deal with. And so that's why it's very important, one, that we help people feel open. We help people feel like at the very beginning in the kick that they can tell us no, that they know exactly what we're going to talk about in the conversation today and where we're going to go and whether or not you're even going to ask for their business. That can be a huge part of helping them relieve some anxiety. Like, what is this conversation going to look like? And then we want to make them feel safe by starting to ask questions about what their goals, what their dreams are, what they're trying to accomplish, and really help them build this dream, plant some seeds and build a dream of their future and what that could look like before we go into a reality check. And so to help overcome, the objection of money, we have to help them realize maybe the greater cost of inaction, maybe the greater cost of not buying a product or service, or maybe the greater cost of not moving forward with a new solution. And sometimes it really isn't about money. Sometimes when someone says it is money, we can get rid of that objection by saying, hey, if the money wasn't an issue, like money aside, do you believe this could help you? Right? If they tell us no, it's like, okay, then it definitely isn't money. If they tell us yes, okay, well, tell me why you feel that way. And then I love asking why, because they begin to sell themselves on your product, on your service. And then it's like, okay, let's go challenge them a little bit more. Let's challenge them and ask them, okay, now what happens if you don't do this? We've got to make that gap big. We've got to help them see that they're going to miss out on way more than the cost of our product or service at the end of the day. And so we want to make sure too that we're focusing on the value more than the cost. We're focusing on making sure we solve the problem, not making this about, hey, this is what our product or service costs on a monthly or annual basis. And we can really help them by getting them to express those emotions and feelings out loud. If someone tells me, hey, like I'm just worried about the cost. Well, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? And sometimes we even have to go and look, you have to show you understand them and you understand where they're coming from and where they want to go. And if you can do that and you believe, hey, I'm here to really serve and help this person, you might be able to go deeper and say, well, look, if you pay for this, or what's going to, like, are you worried you're not going to pay the bills next month? Like, or is it something else? Right? Is it just that we don't have the funds, or we're just afraid we might lose out, or maybe the fear isn't even on the money. The fear could be even deeper, and it's maybe a fear that they don't believe in themselves, right? So there's a lot of psychology around money. There's a lot of fear in losing money, and that fear in losing the money is often tied to other fears. One other thing I think that's really important as we're talking about the psychology of money is we've got to resolve our own personal concerns around money as well. So have you ever noticed how your own anxieties about money can sometimes hold you back in sales? It's a common struggle, but there's ways to overcome that. Here's the empowering truth. By resolving your own concerns about money, you can not only achieve personal and financial well-being for yourself, but also become more effective and a more empathetic salesperson. So if you want to unlock your full potential in sales and truly connect with your customers, start by addressing your own financial psychology. Really interesting. I paid for a couple things myself to help with my business and invest in my business. And I remember being in that moment where it's like I was ready to start wiggling my way out and find a reason to start it a few weeks later, or find a reason to not move forward. And the initial thought was maybe, is this a cost I want to incur? And it wasn't, not even necessarily affordability so much as it was what I realized as I was talking to both these people that I ended up actually doing some business with as a client. I was more worried about my ability to perform than I was about their ability. Right? And it was coming up as a money concern. And so we have to remember, sometimes the concern is financial. Sometimes it's this idea of scarcity, that there's not enough for ourselves to go around. And we can overcome that. We can change our beliefs. It could be as simple as, instead of thinking, hey, there's no one flocking to me to buy my product or service, it might be, hey, I've only got to find 15 of the right clients this year. Or, it depends on what product and what, what those contracts or products or services cost on how many you need. If you're a lower ticket item and you need a lot more clients, it might simply be, hey, I've got to just talk to one interested person a day. I've just got to find one person, right? In some businesses, it might be, I just need to find one client a month, right? And so if you can sometimes work backwards and break your goal down, sometimes it makes it so much more simple and so much easier to see the abundance and the possibility that's available to us. And so we have to remember, in sales, our buyers are making decisions emotionally, often around scarcity and negative feelings around money, negative emotions around money. And if we show up carrying those same type of emotions, if we can't act quickly, if we can't make financial decisions powerfully and fast, if we have limitations around our beliefs around money, that's going to show up too. So, work on yourself, create a safe space for others, create an environment where they can say no, and be ready to help them see the cost of inaction, and be ready to challenge them and show up in a way that's powerful for those that you sell to. I'm Drew Norton, the Everyday Sales Leader, and this is your daily dose of Sales Inception.